So I had a revelation the other day. I'm reading this book again that I've read many times before, but I love revisiting books that are very inspirational, very motivational, and they help me to stay in alignment with my highest self, with the most conscious part of me. And actually, this book talks about the subconscious and the superconscious, which I'm really getting into lately. And so, one of the points that this book made was bringing up what is your king pin? And I thought about this, and I don't remember reading this previously, but I thought about it and I wrote down what my kingpin is right now in my life. What is a kingpin? A kingpin is when loggers put logs in a river and one of the big giant logs gets stuck and blocks the flow of the other logs. And they call it a kingpin because it's basically taking up all of the, I got a piece of hair in my face. It's basically taking up all of the space and blocking the flow of the other logs that need to go down the river, and it's blocking the water. And so they have to dislodge it in order for all of the other logs to continue to flow. And so I'm going to challenge you right now. What do you think is a kingpin going on in your life? And if you can't think of one, I'm going to read you something. I went online and just kind of looked up some things about kingpins that I could bring to light. And this is really interesting because we have kingpins in work and business. We have kingpins in our human relationships. We have kingpins in our relationship with the universe, the divine source energy. And I think that this is something that we don't think a lot about. We don't take the time to discover or uncover where we have a kingpin that is blocking the flow of what we want to create in our lives. And so I just went online and I looked up some examples. And in work and business, I'm going to tell you a couple of the ones that they mentioned was a bottleneck employee, somebody who is not sharing information with others so that there's a feeling of connectedness, community, where everybody's on the same page. And one of their solutions was cross-training. Then there's an outdated process or tool, something that isn't really relevant in the workplace anymore. And so we can get caught up in an old tool that is kind of blocking the flow of where we need to go in our work or in a company. And one of the solutions is to get a new process or a new tool, delegate some of this stuff to other people or streamline things. Another one is a toxic person in the workplace. Now, how many of us have had this? Oh my gosh, I've had this so many times where I have had to work with a toxic person. And what ended up happening was I ended up leaving because I did not want to be in that environment anymore. Now, I didn't know the secret or the key of how to get maybe the other person to leave, but I'm sure it was just time for me to go. I had done what I needed to do in that space, and it was time for me to expand and grow. And so their solution is coaching, mediation, or letting them go can unblock your team. Or as I did in my instance, I left the company. And I can give you many, many, many examples of where there definitely was a kingpin and it was not on my end. And I had to leave that workplace because I was sick and tired of being mothered, manipulated, and managed. And like I said before, it was time for me to go. Now, in life, some of the examples that they've given here are unresolved conflict. So maybe you're holding on to some conflict that you've never worked through. You're afraid of change. How many of us are afraid of change? How many of us sit in a spot where we are not willing to change because we're terrified what will look like? So they put fear is the kingpin, of course, and it's not obvious to others, but it's holding back a flood of possibility. And maybe you've got something rolling around in your mind and you think to yourself, I wish I could do such and such in my career, or I wish I could challenge myself with this dream that I wanted to bring to fruition, but you're so afraid to change that you won't go after it. And that's sad because we all have unlimited possibilities. And then another one, which is great, is a cluttered space. This can be a kingpin to so many things, because when we get rid of stuff in our periphery, or we go through and declutter, whether it's clothing, whether it's furniture, whether it's your desk, which I look like I need to clear a little bit of my desk, what happens is you get a cluttered mind, and then you can't focus. And the cleaning and the picking up and all this stuff takes your energy. And so if you've got a cluttered space, this is something that can really be your kingpin, and it kills your productivity. And so that pile of I'll deal with it later is the kingpin. If you clear it and you get organized, you're on a roll. And not only that, but if you clear it, you all, and you're really struggling financially, you actually will open a flow of abundance into your life. You'll bring new energy in. If you clear out old stuff, you will bring in new energy, new things. And that is really a big spiritual principle. So look up that if you're interested in knowing more. And then you've got one big to do that you keep putting off, you keep procrastinating, like maybe you filing taxes or writing an email to somebody that you really need to write, but you're not sure what to say. And you keep avoiding it, this task, this one big to do task, and everything is backed up behind it. That's the kingpin task. And if you do it, momentum flows again. Oh, that's a really good one. I like that. Okay, now it says in human relationships, these are some really big kingpins. Unworthiness. How many of us have felt unworthy in our lives? Most all of us probably have felt unworthy. And it says we're not feeling like we're not enough, we're not loved, we're not accepted. And this blocks intimacy and vulnerability and authentic connection. And it's often the unspoken kingpin behind people-pleasing, isolation, or fear of being seen. And if you dislodge this, you open the flow to self-acceptance and real relationships. And this is true. And this has happened for me, not only for me with some of my relationships, but I watch people and I end up leaving that relationship because these people don't feel worthy and they're unwilling to unblock their kingpin. And so it's time to move on. Actually, I'm experiencing that currently. And then resentment is another one. Old hurts, betrayals, or unmet expectations that harden into a quiet wall. And you might be polite on the surface, but nothing flows through. And if you bring up the forgiveness, if you start forgiving, not forgetting, but letting go of things, it's often the axe, I love it, that frees the jam. Oh, that's amazing. And then another one is fear of rejection. All of us have probably felt fear of rejection, and you hold back and you don't say what you feel, or you avoid showing your true self. And that fear becomes the log that blocks mutual understanding and real closeness. So if you are vulnerable, it's the current that will carry you forward. So being vulnerable is hard, but if you unblock the flow and are vulnerable, you will actually have yourself in the downward flow, in the stream, and you'll just be flowing along. And that's where we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be flowing downstream. Now, I said maybe you have a blocked connection with your kingpin is in your relationship with what I like to call spirit. Or you can call it God, you can call it universe, you can call it the creator, source energy, whatever. But some of the things that block a connection with our source creator is shame, the belief that you're too flawed or broken to be loved by something bigger. And shame is really sticky because it tells you you're disqualified from divine love, which is so untrue because we're all lovable and we are all loved deeply, deeply, deeply by the creator, source energy. And when you release it even a little teeny bit, it says the river of grace flows wide. Oh, I love that. And that's so amazing because I want to be in a great relationship with my, I used to call it my higher power, but we can call it source, God, the universe. And then disillusionment, when you've prayed, trusted, or believed and got hurt anyway. That disappointment can quietly become a log jam of distrust in the divine. Oh my gosh. Now I have been here big time. And I went to this place when I went through the death of my father and my mom was really sick. And then COVID hit, the pandemic, and all of this crazy stuff happened in that 1 year for me. And then my mother died in 9 months after my father, and my mentor died a couple months after that. It was a really, really, really tough year. Can anybody relate? Can anybody relate to the toughness of 2020 and even into 2021 for me? And I really lost faith. I became disillusioned with my higher power, source creator. And I thought to myself, why have you abandoned me? Why have you forsaken me? And I think I really felt like I had been forsaken. But it says, naming it and grieving it is often the key to spiritual reconnection. And that was true. That was what happened for me. I was hit with a mass amount of grief because my dad died, and I was very, very close to my parents. And when my father died, it was just so much. And then the pandemic, and then all the restrictions and regulations and all of that, and things were changing, and I was taking care of my 3 children, and we got a puppy. And then my mom was super ill, and she was getting ready to transition as well. And it was just so much all at one time. I could barely breathe. I mean, it was awful. And so I did become very disillusioned, and I started reading a lot of conspiracy theories, and I started believing a lot of that stuff. And I really got into the muck and the junk, and my grief was just so great. It took me down a really fear-based path. And I really, like I said, felt very disillusioned, very left, abandoned, alone. And I thought, oh my gosh, what is this hellhole we're living in? And so that's what I experienced. I don't know about you all. And so grieving was the only way I knew how to deal with it. And I walked through that for a few years, actually. And so if you're ever going through that, know, first of all, you're never alone. And second of all, keep going and do whatever it takes, whatever you can to get back to that you and that belief that there is a greater, higher, unlimited being that is taking care of us and watching out for us and that loves us, because I forgot that for a while. The next one is control, trying to manage every outcome, avoid pain, or earn your way into feeling safe or spiritual. Control is a false kingpin. It looks strong, but it's blocking surrender. Ooh, I just love this. Letting go even for a moment can bring floods of peace. And you all, I have a big surrender story. Back in the day when I was married to my husband, I was in a really, I felt this being in this horrible place and not knowing how to get out of it. And I had tried to control. I had controlled and tried everything I could think of to make my marriage work, to make it last, to not leave that commitment that I made. And this was so hard for me to surrender because I thought, I can do this. I can do anything. I'm so capable. But I had tried and tried and tried every solution that I could think of. And my marriage was just not where I wanted it to be. And I didn't know what to do because I thought, I've made a vow, I made a commitment, and I need to stick with this. And I was raised in a very religious home where we were supposed to honor our commitments and our vows. And we had, I'd watch my parents stay married and their parents and their parents. So divorce was kind of like not an option. But I was so miserable and so unhappy. And so one day I surrendered everything. And I was at my breaking point. And I just said, I don't know what to do, to spirit, and you take it over. You do what you need to do to fix this because I can't do it anymore. And it was fixed. Like, it wasn't fixed immediately, but it was fixed pretty quick. And I really surrendered and let go. But I'd been controlling for so long that I think I had known I need something to change or shift. And when I was ready to leave, I made that surrender moment happen in July, and by December, I was out of the house and somewhere else. So if you surrender, sometimes things can shift pretty quick. And so letting go is really important, and it can bring floods of peace. The next one is guilt, a chronic sense of I should be doing more, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, and it clogs up joy, presence, and grace. Ooh, guilt is a good one. I've had a lot of this guilt. This is amazing. Guilt keeps you trying to fix the log jam with more logs. Compassion clears it. And compassion is for yourself, of course. Compassion for you. How many of us don't give ourselves the compassion that we would give everybody else? So think about that. And the next one is cynicism. I didn't think about this one. A defense mechanism when hope has been hurt. It's protective, but it blocks awe, wonder, trust, and softness. Honest curiosity and slow, real conversations can help soften that edge. Okay, that's interesting. These are really great. And I'm going to add one more because this is the one that I wrote down. Comparison. How many of us go through a comparing phase? And it's not really FOMO, because I bet that could be one as well. But I think comparison for me has been very prominent in my life. For example, let's say in your work, you're not where you want to be at the level you want to be at, and you're a certain age and you think, oh my goodness, I should have been, well, let's just give this an example, the CEO of the company already, or I should have been the vice president or whatever. And that's where I go. If that person's been doing this and they accomplished it and they're so good, what's taking me so long? Why am I not reaching that space? And I think that comparison for me has been something that has haunted me for many, many years. And again, it's not in every facet, but we can compare ourselves to others when it comes to money. We can compare ourselves with others when it comes to our physique, our body. We can compare ourselves to others when we look at material possessions, such as homes or cars or trips. And so where do you, if you do, compare yourself to others? How is that your kingpin? Where is that applicable in your life? Because I know I've had it, like I said, in a few different facets of my life. And it really has held me back from certain relationships and certain avenues that I want to go down. And so that for me right now is where I'm looking at myself, at the comparison kingpin. And so I'm going to continue to evolve with this and sit with this and think to myself, how am I going to let that log jam of comparison go? What am I going to do to release it so that I can be in the flow of life in a bigger, better way and allow myself to be flowing downstream? So that's my message for today. And if you had something come into your awareness, maybe you want to go write it down. Maybe you want to journal about it. These are the things that I do every day. And this is what I teach to my clients all the time is go do something to try to anchor in what you just learned, awakened, started to shift in your consciousness. Because if you do that, if you take action on something that comes into your awareness or your perception, then you actually will anchor that into your subconscious and you will start changing, and it will look different. Your life will look different if you continue to take the action. And so I hope you enjoyed my message today. Thanks for listening if you were here to join us. Today I turned off the comments because the other day I noticed I was getting some very interesting comments, and I decided that I didn't want to be distracted by the comments today. So maybe I'll turn them back on after I finish this video, but I hope you have a super duper wonderful, amazing, glorious day. And thanks for listening to my talk about Kingpin. I think it's fascinating, and I love the analogy or the metaphor. And I will look forward to connecting with you all again very soon.